Alright, so hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Beyond Spray and Pray 1000. I am Spray and Pray 1000, and today it's a usual sort of podcast. I did not do one last week because I did episode 122, I believe about 2 weeks ago. I just decided that, I would give like a week to let things settle, and I do still plan on making this sort of a bi-weekly event. A weekly event instead of a bi-weekly event. Just because I do want to stay on top of it. It gives me a little more time to talk about whatever. There's not really too much that's going to happen at this part of the year between both the ongoing global situation as well as just in general April, March. Usually the spring is a little bit lackluster, or we're kind of past the point where like a lot of stuff usually pops off in the early months of the year. Usually, it's obviously like the fall and into December is like a big time for game releases. Then like March and April are usually big. And then there's like the late May into early June, July. And then we go back and nothing really usually happens in August. But I mean, at this point now, games kind of release all times of the year. So that's not to say there's nothing. It's just that most days, most years, there's usually like a drought or like definitely a slowing of game releases. Now, if you're wondering what the background is for this one, it's actually a picture from Final Fantasy XIV. I just really like Amarot. I think it looks really, really nice. So I just kind of left that there. I sort of redid some of my OBS layers. So as opposed to the usual of, what is it? I don't even know what I call it. I call it the waveform because it's like a bunch of wave forms, the usual picture. In fact, can I flash it? No, that's the wrong layer. I like keeping this around. I think it's a nice one. I'm not even sure where I got it from. I think it was given to me by How Original, but besides that, I just figured that I would have a change of pace for this particular episode just because. So moving beyond that, now really the first thing I want to talk about is something I particularly care about, which is Assassin's Creed Valhalla gets the release date for its first DLC, which is Wrath of the Druids. It will launch April 29th, assuming, nothing horrible happens and the game in the universe doesn't blow up. So that's pretty cool because I recently finished Assassin's Creed Valhalla at this point it wouldn't even be recently. It would be like a month, almost 2 months ago. It was like mid to late January. And it's the first of 2 DLCs. It seems like they will only ever really do 2 DLCs for an Assassin's Creed game. Which, I mean, for Valhalla, I'm kind of cool with that because Valhalla was a significantly weaker entry than the previous 2 games. But I'm kind of a little sad that we didn't get more out of Odyssey, especially. Like, Origins I could understand, too. Unfortunately, as much as I like the setting and I like the characters of Origins, I feel like having only 2 there was a detriment, but I could understand that because they were making Odyssey. Not even a year later, they already had a sequel that was, in my opinion, bigger and gameplay-wise much better. But as you know, Odyssey was followed by a year where they didn't release anything for Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed for, the second time since 2009, and only the third time since the series literally launched in 2007, had a year where they did not release any major Assassin's Creed games. I think the only thing they released were re-releases. So, I think, as far as Assassin's Creed goes, it would have been cool maybe if they just sprinkled in some extra DLC for Odyssey, to spice up the story, add more to it. Obviously, they had the whole plan with the plot line for Legacy of the First Blade and the, the other one? Can't even remember, the Fate of Atlantis. But it would have been cool to be able to continue playing as Alexios and go around and do things. There's definitely a lot of storytelling potential that could have been done and just wasn't, so whatever. But Valhalla is, to really summarize the 100-hour playthrough that is Valhalla is what I would consider to be like a very, very slow-running game. It's not bad, but it definitely, not only is it an acquired taste, it's definitely not as good at almost anything that it does compared to Origins and Odyssey. But for some reason, like the last week or two, I was really, really like antsy. I was really, really itching to play it some more, because that's the one thing I think that the Assassin's Creed games do for me, is that, like, yeah, they might not be the best in terms of action RPG, and they might have totally ditched stealth as like a mandatory part of the game, but I do really like just the way it's like now an open world RPG where you can level up, equip different items, go different places, do different things. And I actually kind of really wanted to play more of it, even though there is still more for me to do in the base game of Valhalla. The base game of Valhalla would basically have me running around, you know, just kind of killing time, doing the awful side missions that aren't even necessary to beat the game or to hit 100%. Or I'm sorry, not 100%, to hit max level and begin your mastery training. But, I mean, hopefully we'll see what happens with Wrath of the Druids. Like I said, I did not really look into anything about it. I just know we're going to Ireland and we're going to be doing something with a cult. And that's about it. So that's the gist of that. Because I want to go into it fresh like I do with most games and DLCs now. I don't want to know everything about it. I'm not one of those kinds of people. For me, experiencing is basically like part of the experience, to say the least. Now, one thing that also came out is that Namco Bandai released the Tales of series best-selling games. And now this is very interesting for me because as a fan of the Tales series and as someone who has played a ton of the Tales series, it's really interesting. It's also like a good idea for me to see like what they kind of expect Tales games to really do, because Tales for the longest they did not really want to have release new games in the West. I've gone over this 1,000 times and I'll talk about it again because it's one of the biggest what the fuck moments I've ever seen in my life, of a series doing, from my understanding at the time, very, very well, and then the publisher looking at it and saying, well, we don't really know if we want to do it or if it'll do well. So more or less they announced for different regions how the Tales games have sold around the world. So there's worldwide, there's Japan and Asia, there's North America, and then there's Europe. So for the most part, at least worldwide, it kind of shapes up to what I expected. The Tales of Symphonia sold 2.4 million units, which Tales of Symphonia is probably the one that most Americans are at least loosely familiar with. It was a GameCube exclusive when it came out originally before they jumped to PS2. But it was definitely something I know at least a couple other people played. It's a really fun game. I really do enjoy it, but it's very basic in a lot of its combat elements. It's a great game, and I totally recommend that you actually pick it up and play it if you have not. If you could find the PS3 version. I know it's on Steam, and you know, the PS5 not being PS3 compatible is really kind of a shame that there's no real way to play those games. But other than that, Tales of Vesperia, which was also a 360 exclusive, sold 2.37 million, which is also, in my opinion, something I really expected, because Vesperia is also the other Tales game that I see get mentioned a lot. It gets thrown out all the time as like what most people consider to be the best Tales game. Now there's people I've seen throw out like Abyss being their favorite. I actually have never really played Abyss, even though now I can because I actually have a PS2 that works. So that's definitely a game that I want to play. There's a couple of Tales games I never played, and then a couple that I need to play for YouTube. Well, really more like one that I need to play for YouTube. But beyond that goes Tales of Destiny, which is basically really popular in Japan. Tales of Zestiria, Tales of Berseria, Tales of Fantasia, Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Eternia, Tales of Xillia, and Tales of Destiny 2. And even though Tales of Xillia is really far down on the list, you have to remember that based on the pre-orders, or at least the very, very early sales of Exilia in the West, they were willing to localize the sequel. And actually, if you scroll down here, Xillia 2, if you scroll down to North America to see how it really breaks up by region, because what I just read was worldwide. I really probably should include the link to this. Tales of Symphonia is again at the top, followed by Vesperia. Now, Zestiria is actually on number 3, because I don't think Tales of Destiny ever got localized in the West, which is why in the Japan/Asia best-selling, most of the top games there, I don't think have ever been localized in the West. The West has actually gotten a surprisingly small amount of Tales games. And for starters, I don't know if Tales of Eternia and Tales of Destiny got localized, but I definitely can see how Tales of Symphonia, Vesperia, and Zestiria sold basically the best here. And it's nice to see that at least number 6, which is Xillia, gave way to number 9 to sell well. Because based on their performance, you would think that, I mean, well, I guess number 6 and number 9 ain't too bad, all things considered, in a series with like 20 games. And that's good, because I think that this series does deserve it, because I do like it. I do want them to keep making more of them. But Zestiria, even though I really didn't like Zestiria, I thought it was like a bare average game. The one thing I will say about it is that it did get a lot of press, and it did get a huge push, more so than Xillia, especially being that it was on the PS4, I think, exclusively in North America. I might be wrong about that. It might be on PS3. I don't know. It is basically a PS3 game. And that's actually something to say about all of these games, is that Zestiria and Berseria are basically PS3 games that got ported in America to the PS4. Basically, since Vesperia, which was a 360 game, and Vesperia got the Japanese PS3 re-release, which we eventually got like 10 years later, basically they've been making PS3 games this whole time. They never really moved to the new hardware. And that's one thing that Tales of Arise is aiming to do. I mean, I don't know if they're going to make it a PS5 game, but it's definitely on like PS4 tier hardware more so. Because everything else was just made for PS3 and ported. In the same way that Symphonia, I'm not sure what they based the PS3 port off of. It might have been the PS2 version, because I think that had extra stuff in it. As it usually goes with stuff like Resident Evil and whatnot, that have initial GameCube releases and then PS2 re-releases. But yeah, I think that that's kind of interesting to see. I think it's definitely something really cool, and it's nice to see that Symphonia, which is a game that I hold really close to my heart, actually more or less is like one of the top performers of the Tales series. Even though it's number 7 in Japan, it's number 1 in the world because it's sold so well basically outside of Japan. And even in Japan, it's number 7, which is pretty cool. And I like that, because I like that game a lot. The sequel, not too much. But the original game is like chef's kiss, just amazing in my mind. Moving beyond that, because I know Tales is kind of an acquired taste to begin with. Square Enix had a Square Enix Presents, which I guess they were talking about their new games. They talked about Avengers. I kind of don't really care about Avengers anymore, other than memeing that it's funded by Final Fantasy XIV sub money. I kind of really don't give a shit about it. But I lost my train of thought. Project Athia is now called Forspoken. It's going to be I think an open world action adventure game. There's not really too much known about it at the moment. However, I kind of have to give them credit for it, because I'm actually really interested in it. I really hate to say it, but Square Enix is the kind of company that I keep coming back to, even though I know I'm probably going to be disappointed with it. They usually make a lot of weird and interesting decisions in my mind. But I kind of really like them, even when it's 14 being, or not 14, even when it's Final Fantasy doing a lot of weird shit. They showed this off originally as as Project Athia. I think it was like maybe a year or two ago. And now they're showing it off. It might have been like 2018 they showed it off to like demo like what next gen hardware is going to be. And now it's actually a game, which is kind of cool. It's going to have a focus on open world traversal as well as using magical powers. It's going to be released on Windows and PlayStation 5, which is pretty much the Square Enix go-to at this point. So that's coming out at some point in 2022. And it's also developed by Luminous Productions, which I think is pretty cool, because I believe Luminous Productions is the studio that works with the Luminous engine, which I'm not sure if they still use. Let me actually look. Do they still use the Luminous engine? Yeah, I think so. Because they talked about the Luminous engine from 13-2, I'm actually not sure, because a lot of these engines that used to get... Oh, yeah, here we go. The studio's leader and Final Fantasy 15 director Hajime Tabata left Luminous Productions and Square Enix around the same time. That's when they canceled the DLC for 15, because that game is a fucking disaster. Developed resources shifted to a then unannounced AAA title, Forspoken, with the studio continuing to use the Luminous engine. Okay. That I kind of at least have to give them credit for that, because the Luminous engine's been kicked around a lot. Unlike Konami, which used the Fox engine, and you have to remember, I mean, nowadays it's 2021. It was literally 6 years ago when Phantom Pain came out, believe it or not. As hard as that is to believe, it was 6 years ago when Final Fantasy 15, or I'm sorry, when Phantom Pain came out, and 5 when 15 came out. The Fox engine for Phantom Pain, and to a lesser extent Ground Zeroes, was basically like top of the line. Like, that was like peak performance from game developers. That was like, you didn't really get much better than that on console at the time. And I was really kind of saying to myself, well, wow, imagine what Konami could do if they really harnessed the power of this engine and put it in like future Metal Gear games. Because I knew they were going to make more after Kojima left, right? No, but you know, no one. That was my original thought, was that Kojima would leave, they would keep the series going, because you know it's basically what they're almost synonymous with. That and Castlevania, and I guess Pro Evolution Soccer if you're not in America, and even if you are, but you know what I mean. And then everything happened with Konami and everything, and that was just a complete mess and a disaster. But I was really kind of sad when basically that engine only ever got used for Pro Evolution Soccer, and now they're not even going to use it anymore because they're going to shift to Unreal going forward with the PlayStation 5. And it just feels like a massive loss. I mean, they made PT on that engine. There was a lot of potential for the Fox engine, because at the time, in 2014, it was really first used in 2013, but at the time with 2014, 2015, it was like considerably ahead of like everything else around. Like, you have to consider that the best looking games before that were probably like either David Cage games or like GTA 5. And to see like something like Phantom Pain with like the rain effects in some of the trailers and stuff like that, that was like considerably way the fuck ahead. And honestly, I think it, at least on some level, inspired the RE engine that Capcom uses now for everything. And I really hope that, I really see that as like the true continuation. I really hope they don't lose that, because I really do like the way that the RE engine does lighting. I think it's one of the best parts of the engine is how it does lighting. And there's a couple of times playing some of their games, I actually kind of almost jump in place, because the shadows are, I guess, almost probably some of the most realistic shadows. They definitely really look it. And that's what I really feel bad about, is that like a Silent Hill game that would have taken advantage of how powerful the RE engine was, or not RE, I'm sorry, the Fox engine, would have been light years ahead of almost anything else. And it's a shame to see that they're not even going to like keep it going on the chance maybe they'll upgrade it for a future engine. And I got nothing wrong with Unreal. A lot of games are made in Unreal. In fact, I'm pretty sure like a very sizable chunk of the industry is based off Unreal. But I do think that, like, you know, I respect like creativity, I expect originality. And for what it's worth, the RE engine, the Fox engine, and the Luminous engine, I think really have a lot of potential. But one of them is dead. The Luminous, I guess this is the first real trial by fire, because we're not talking about like Final Fantasy 15 anymore. Well, Capcom still uses the RE engine. In fact, they use it for basically everything now. But isn't that like the point of it? You know, it's like in an ideal world, right? I know I've made fun of EA and how they ruined Anthem and what was the other game they ruined? Mass Effect Andromeda. They ruined Mass Effect Andromeda by forcing Bioware to use Frostbite, which they were not prepared for. They couldn't get the necessary help for, because most of those people were helping DICE, I believe, with Battlefield 5 at the time. They didn't have the resources available to them. Like, I know I made fun of them for trying to force their shitty engine on them, but in a real level, like, if developers can get the help they need from the publisher, especially when they force the fucking engine on them. I mean, on some level, it's all forcing. But, you know, especially when they say, hey, Bioware, you're doing this, or you're not doing anything at all. I I do kind of have to respect that. I do like in a perfect world that should really work out, right? Like an engine should be good enough to use for multiple different avenues, and if not, not everything can do everything. But the fact that Capcom is able to use it, I think for Resident Evil 7 was I think the first game that did it. Resident Evil 2 and 3, I think Resident Evil 8 obviously, because Resident Evil 8 looks just like 7. And what was the other game that they used it for? I think Devil May Cry 5. The fact that they have like almost 3 different styles of games on it, a third-person shooter, first-person shooter, and then a literal hack and slash, beat 'em up, or, well, no, hack. What's the difference between hack and slash and beat 'em up? I don't even know. Obviously the weapons, but aren't they like basically like the same type of game, kinda? But you know what I mean, like an action hack and slash game. That's really cool in my mind. Like that's the type of cool shit I like to see. Like the same thing with the Fox engine. You have Phantom Pain, which is a tactical third-person stealth game, where the lighting really does play a factor in how you do things in the game. Versus, what else did they use it for? Well, they say Final Fantasy 15 here. I'm not sure what, because I don't think Final Fantasy 15 uses the Luminous engine. Because neither does Kingdom Hearts 3. That was a big thing. They shifted development off of it. So yeah, I don't think they use it. It might have been like some of the DLC maybe uses it. I don't know why they list 15 here, because it says 2019, and it's obvious that it doesn't use it here. This is in Japanese. I'm not... Oh, the Stadia version? That makes no sense to me. But you get the idea. Like, ideally, it should be able to, support an RPG and all different stuff. That's the really, like, from a technological aspect, that's a really cool thing to consider. That you have engines that flat out do so much different stuff. And so many different, avenues that they're able to produce games out of it. Which is just cool. It's a testament to technological prowess. It's a testament to the envisioning of how they can get these games to work on hardware, because the game engine is a hard thing. That's why Unreal is such a safe thing to fall back on. Actually, now that I think about it, what the hell does Ubisoft use? They use Anvil, right? Yeah, Anvil Next. It's been used for Unity, Syndicate, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. Okay, because I remember now when you boot the game, because Valhalla crashes all the fucking time. When you boot the game, it says Anvil Next. I hate it. I love Valhalla and I hate it at the same time. What does Rainbow Six use? Rainbow Six uses Anvil Next too? It uses Anvil Next. I don't know if that Anvil Next 2 is the same thing. Let's see. I did not know they used it for this many games. Holy shit. Wow. You know what it is? They make different iterations of it. That's what it is. Okay. It used to be called Scimitar, and it's been used as far back as Assassin's Creed. And the Prince of Persia game from 2008. I remember when that shit was new. I'm getting really old now. I actually, on a completely different topic, I started to realize, like, now I'm starting to view, like, my mid-20s as, like, a completely different era. Not only from when I started YouTube, because I didn't open my channel until 2009, which was the end of my middle school era. But now, I'm 25, right? Like, I'm not a young man anymore, really. I'm halfway between starting my roaring 20s and entering my boomer 30s. And I'm very tipped towards my 30s now. I'm actually closer to my 26th than I am to my 24th and younger. So, you have to remember, when I was a 13-year-old, I started this channel ages ago. As a 13-year-old, didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but I had a general idea. And I remember when these games were new, because my middle school friends at the time played a lot of these games. They talked about Assassin's Creed, and Assassin's Creed 1 is an awful fucking video game, and actually one of the few games I think deserves a remake, because it is actually not fun to play at points. And I played it years later, so maybe, I didn't have to turbo through it just because it was the best we had. But Assassin's Creed 1 to 2 are almost completely different games. And I just feel nostalgic remembering how different things were in 2007 and 2008. I fucking hated my middle school, but I definitely did like the games coming out. It was definitely a renaissance for video games. you know, the graphics, the promise that so many games would come out and blow your socks away that never happened. Like, remember when Versus 13 was showed off? I was really, really happy for that. One of the reasons I wanted to get a PS3. Even 13, I was like, wow, this looks so cool. Look at all the shit Square Enix is going to do. And yeah, that didn't really go anywhere. But long story short, what's the difference? What's Ubisoft Anvil? So they've more or less renamed it a bunch. Right? Yeah, it's just updating the engine. So they have like Scimitar, Anvil, Anvil Next, Anvil 2.0, and then Ubisoft Anvil, which is what Valhalla runs off of, Immortal Phoenix Rising, and the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, which is not out yet, right? That is getting delayed. Yep, it was pushed back. Okay, and it was pushed back originally on December 8th to March 18th. Oh no, it was announced. Oh no, it was pushed back, I'm sorry. It was originally scheduled to release January 21st of 2021. That didn't happen. It was pushed back on December 8th to March 18th. And then in February 5th, it was postponed indefinitely. So who the fuck knows when this game is coming out? I mean, I like the Sands of Time. I don't know if this game needs a remake, but whatever. It's not even worth complaining about. Even Resident Evil 4's remake isn't even worth complaining about anymore compared to Code Veronica. I feel like Code Veronica should have gotten it, but whatever. But yeah, Anvil Next actually runs a lot of games. It's actually kind of cool. So it's like all the different shifts. So this is really what happened with all the different shifts in Assassin's Creed gameplay. Anvil Next was used like exclusively for Assassin's Creed, like the America collection, basically. 3, Liberation, Black Flag, Freedom Cry, and Rogue all take place on the same engine. And then Ubisoft, then Unity, Syndicate, Siege, Wildlands is on the same engine, Steep, For Honor, Origins, Odyssey, Breakpoint, and I don't even know what Hyperscape is. Is that Battle Royale game that they showed off? Yeah. Those all take place on the same engine. That's pretty fucking cool. I know this has turned into a diatribe about video game engines, but I think it's really kind of cool to consider so many different styles of games are on different engines. Like, there are different engines out there. I mean, there's Unity. I didn't even talk about Unity. Unity is mostly like an indie game dev sort of a deal. Unity games are kind of a meme in and of themselves because they're usually asset flips. But I digress. Like, it's still interesting. It's just a shame that some of the engines that were really cool didn't really make it. And unfortunately, it's a shame that Frostbite still exists, but whatever. What else do I have? They have a development update for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. Ooh. Can you feel that? Can you feel the excitement in the air? Here's something I want to talk about. There is a EAGate scandal going on in FIFA. So, this is a report by Eurogamer. EA has suspended all discretionary content granting indefinitely amid the ongoing EAGate scandal that has rocked the FIFA series. Earlier this week, Eurogamer reported on how the FIFA community had unearthed direct messages that appeared to show an EA employee selling coveted Ultimate Team cards for thousands of pounds on the black market. These messages mentioned FIFA Ultimate Team icon cards and packages priced from €750 to €1,000. In one WhatsApp message, 3 Prime icon moment cards were offered for €1,700. So basically, as you could already imagine, this was more of a European thing, it sounds like, because I didn't even know this happened at all. And usually, EA news hits me like a fucking pie to the face, because I love watching EA just fuck up the simplest shit imaginable and just be greedy. But I guess this was very big for a bunch of stuff. But I mean, alright, I hate playing the I could have told you so card, because I always feel like it's a dick move. But I kind of feel like EA doing this is not, like, I could totally see this happening. I think that this is the company that does that. Like the laundry list of shit that Electronic Arts does is probably longer than almost any video game company anywhere else. But like, they do it completely in the open, and they just really don't give a shit. And they've been doing it for years. I've been covering it on this fucking podcast for literally years. the icon cards are the most sought after, or among the most sought after in FIFA Ultimate Team. They include legendary players such as Brazilian Ronaldo, Pele, so on and so forth. They are near impossible to obtain through the mode's controversial loot boxes. EA launched an investigation in response and overnight provided an update. So what is it? A rogue. Let's see. Let's finish reading this. We learned that FIFA Ultimate Team items were granted to individual accounts that did not earn them through gameplay, i.e. by opening a pack, purchasing through the transfer market, completing a reward challenge, or other engagement. It appears that one or more EA accounts, which were either compromised or being used inappropriately by someone within EA, directly entitled items to these individual accounts. So basically, some dude at EA would probably flip some dudes some extra money to give them, these incredibly expensive and rare items. That's what it sounds like to me. Someone at EA used their power to try to have a little side hustle. Like you skim off the main product a little bit, and you get to make a little bit of a killing. But I mean, like that's the thing, that's the thing about just anything on the internet now, is that why, I mean, if you got scammed by this or you just felt a certain type of way, you could, I'm pretty sure whoever it was just blew up their spot. They were like, well, fuck you. And they just showed it all off. They're like, all right, here you go. This is what this guy's been doing. Hey, look, this guy is flipping 1,700 euro. How much is 1,700 euro? Let's see, just so I can get a good mental image of how much that is. It's $2,000 basically. $2,010.16. It's like $2,000 fucking flipping for euros basically. How do I get what article is it? Here we go. That is ridiculous, but I don't really not expect this from EA, honestly, especially when like every game that they make runs off of randomized loot box drops. Even to this day, I'm pretty sure Anthem had it. Mass Effect had it at least in 3 for the multiplayer. I didn't play Andromeda's multiplayer, but I could guarantee you in Andromeda they did the same thing. What else did they do it for? Battlefield had loot boxes. Before it was even like a big thing, they had the battle packs. Now I remember those because I think you could buy them at the time if you wanted to unlock more shit. And those actually would like gate you out of unlocking stuff if for certain guns or whatever. I think you could unlock certain things, but if you got lucky with the battle pass, you could get like identical grips or stuff for your guns. Like it was pretty bad, and other things like camouflages and stuff you could only get from battle passes and stuff. And like I was cool with it because like it rewarded you for playing the game. Like it wasn't, you could totally unlock them at a reasonable pace, I felt, by playing the game. My biggest problem, which is what always comes back to with a lot of these games, is that there's no cross save. There's no, I could log into my Xbox account, flip over, and then I could play the same progression, no cross progression on other consoles and other platforms. And that's really why I stopped playing Battlefield 4, is that they sold it on the 360, which again, the 360 barely can fucking run it, which is why a lot of the things have to be disabled for that version. And they sold it on the 360, and I was like, okay, I'll play it, because that's what we were playing on at the time. At the time, not most of us didn't have the PS4, which was new back when that game was new. If that gives you an idea when the last modern Battlefield game came out. And now, flash forward to 2021, or rather 2018, because that's really when I would have wanted to play it. It's like, well, now I gotta start over. I gotta redo everything from zero. And I'm not, like, I mean, it facilitates people buying, like, extra loot boxes and extra bullshit. But, like, I don't think I just think that's kind of shitty. All it does is say, well, if you want to continue playing at more or less the same level, you need to boost yourself up in order to do it. And I think that that's stupid. And needless to say, that's why I stopped playing. I'm like, I'm not gonna, all the memories and all the hard work I put into this account are for nothing. I don't have it anymore. And that's one reason why PC is just a really better platform for a lot of these, because it's always really the same amount of stuff, right? Like like crossing generational lines and crossing even like company lines is not going to fuck you in the same way that, like, oh, I played on 360, now I bought a PS4 because, Those are just reasons. That's why I kind of didn't like it. But I mean, EA isn't the only company that does that. But it's just one of the fucking things that they do, is that they're not very user-friendly with almost anything that they do. And I honestly feel like they're going to get ready to ditch Origin as a launcher, because pretty much every game on Origin is now on Steam. And you could buy Battlefields on Steam that are long since dead. You could buy Star Wars games on Steam that were Origin exclusive. Like, all their games are pretty much, like, they're even on Game Pass now. And either they're opening themselves way the fuck up, or they're prepping to get rid of Origin as a launcher and just, you know, pay the Steam tax and just exist on the Steam tax. And I honestly can't blame them either way. I mean, who really wants to run something in competition to Steam? I mean, Epic will do it because they have both the money and the absolute determination to say fuck you to Steam. But for EA, you know, for Bethesda, Battle.net is also one of those things. But that's because Battle.net has their niche games they don't let go anywhere else anymore. Even Call of Duty doesn't show up on Steam. And the reason they can get away with it is because it's Call of Duty. And, you know, whatever other small games they can get here and there. You know, a lot of these other smaller ones really have to consider, well, is it worth really having our own launcher? Like, is it worth having Uplay or Ubisoft Connect be its own launcher? Like, I feel like it just isn't at all. Is it worth all that extra, you know, effort and everything when you could just use the Steam interface, which has worked for so long? I mean, they'll support it for a long time, I'm sure. Like, Ubisoft Connect is new, like, all things considered, and it's basically the evolution of Uplay. I don't expect them to ditch it, but I mean, you know, Siege is on Steam. You could invite people more or less through it the same way. I think it might. I don't know. Maybe it works only through Ubisoft Connect. I don't know, but it's just extra work to have double the accounts, but we're still using Steam as the master controller, you know. And Origin kind of sucks, to get back on point. I've never really enjoyed using Origin. It's only been a crime of necessity. Like, when I was playing the Anthem early access or whatever, early launch $15 bundle, which, you know, was awful. That was probably one of the worst experiences I had gaming, and I'm not just saying that because that was actually the last time I was sick, but I was really sick doing that. So yeah, in any event, EA insisted its initial investigation had shown questionable activity involving a very small number of accounts and items, but despite this, called the alleged activity unacceptable. EA then vowed to take action against any employee found to have been engaging in this activity, to remove any items granted from the FIFA Ultimate Team system, and permanently ban any player known to have bought them. EA then apologized to the FIFA community regardless of these actions. We appreciate how concerning this is to all our players. We apologize for the impact of these improper grants within the community. I don't really think it's more than just people are mad that they were able to actually just buy it outright. I mean, the whole system is kind of fucked up, but I mean, it's whatever. We also appreciate how extremely annoying and frustrating it is that this practice might have come from within EA. We're angry too. EA is angry, guys. EA is also angry that this fucker bought what he needed to buy for $2,000 instead of spending $5,000 on loot boxes. EA is so mad. They are upset. They are in arms. We know that the trust of our communities is hard-earned and based on the principles of fair play. This illicit activity shakes that trust. We've also been clear since the creation of Ultimate Team that items cannot be exchanged outside of our game, and that's how we keep our game safe from manipulation and bad actors. This is a breach of that principle as well, and we won't let it stand. They go on to discuss content granting, something it rarely does. This is when EA gives Ultimate Team content to player accounts. EA said that unless these items are issued to replace lost content, they are usually non-tradable items, which means they have no exchange value in the game, cannot be sold on the transfer market, and cannot be shared with other players. Examples include items used in testing and quality verification, discretionary content granting to athletes, EA's partners, and employees. Every now and then the community will discover a famous footballer's Ultimate Team because they run up against them online, and sometimes we'll see footballers use a special 99 rated version of themselves in-game. That's discretionary content granting to athletes. The items granted on a discretionary basis, these partners and employees are always non-tradable and can only be used by the account to which they were originally granted. We do not use this discretionary process to grant content to professional video game influencers. Of course, this content can be used in Ultimate Team's competitive pay-to-win multiplayer against other players online, a balance issue EA does not address in its statement. Yo, Eurogamer, which one? Who fired this 50 cal? Jesus, man. EA said the sum of the items granted through these 3 scenarios, customer experience testing and partners combined, is less than 0.0006% of the total player items in the FIFA 21 ecosystem. EA insisted these grants have no impact on the odds of any player in the ecosystem acquiring these players and have no bearing on the overall volume of available content, and all content granted is untradeable. Okay. Alright, they've suspended all discretionary content granting for an indefinite period while they figure it out. Basically, someone was trying to skim off the top. I'm just gonna I'm gonna put that as my horse in this race. I think someone was really scraping off the top. They thought maybe they could have a side hustle of selling it and make, you know, make $2,000 to give someone a fucking virtual player. I mean, come on, it makes more than enough sense. You know, this is like when people try to fucking skim off the top. You know, you see it in TV shows, and it happens in real life. I mean, it's a real life fucking thing. Someone tries to, you know, you got your thing going. You know, maybe you're selling. Okay, I hate to use the drug analogy, but you're selling illicit substances. You know, you know what? Maybe one package goes missing here or there, and you could sell it, and you make pure profit. You know, you don't have to pay the big boss man, when you could have a little bit of a side hustle. Maybe he doesn't notice. Maybe, well, ideally he never finds out, etc., etc. I'm gonna go with that. And then infamously they talk about how they called FIFA loot boxes surprise mechanics, likening them to Kinder eggs. Yes, that was a long time ago. I even forgot that existed. Basically, EA is going to be the company that drives the loot box phenomenon into a courtroom, and I'm pretty sure they already have, at least in a couple of different countries. They consider them gambling. They even say here in the Netherlands they consider this gambling. EA is going to be the one that pushes this too far. I used to think it would be Overwatch with the fucking loot boxes, but I think EA is really going to be the ones that push it too far. And I don't feel bad for them. I can't remember the last time I genuinely felt bad for Electronic Arts on anything. So I don't have anything else really to say about it. I really just think someday they're going to end up in a courtroom like a lot of companies. They're going to do whatever stupid shit they're going to do, and maybe it'll never bite them in the ass, and maybe they'll just get away with it, because, I mean, it's a video game, right? At the end of the day, if you spend a ton of money on random mechanics, I personally hate gambling just because of this, but maybe at the end of the day, you know, you spend a ton of money on random mechanics, or whatever the fuck they want to call it, surprise mechanics, sorry, and you think that that's a good idea. I mean, it's your money. You're free to fucking waste it. Or maybe, you know, maybe you want to be, I don't know. I can't get in the pay to win mindset, because I just am not that type of person. But if that's what you want to do, I mean, sure. I think it's a very dumb way to waste money. Some people will just say playing video games is a very dumb way to waste money. So, I mean, it depends on your perspective. But I think, objectively speaking, what EA does is pure greed. And I think that they're going to push it too far one day. And I mean, like, they could make the argument, well, and I do agree. I do agree with the argument of, well, users need to, you know, track their playtime and how much they spend, right? Because I never want to put that onus on a company, right? Because if you put that onus on EA, I do believe that then you have to put onus on other companies for like granting, you know, making video games that are super violent and stuff, that, like, when people say, well, these companies shouldn't make it, you know, the kids, think of the children on an M-rated game. I do believe that onus is on the consumer to not do that, you know, and if they do it, I mean, as long as EA makes good on their stuff, I don't really see a problem with it. Like, obviously here, someone was bypassing the system, presumably within EA, or who had access to the system. So that, I totally understand why people would be mad about that. But, like, if people just want to spend, you know, $1,000 a month or whatever the fuck they want to do, I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, mobile games are popular for that reason. And that's fine. But, and I don't even, like, what they're doing is probably immoral. I don't think it's necessarily illegal. It's probably illegal in certain countries because of how their laws are, but it's not really illegal. at least from what they've determined now, right? Like it, but it really does border on the line of legality, and especially in a lot of places. And it definitely is greedy, and it definitely makes games worse, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of games where they have implemented this, and they have been fundamentally worse off because of the way that they did this. And that's kind of why I like games like Black Ops 1 with the COD points. I actually really like Black Ops 1. In retrospect, I really have come to love Black Ops 1 more than almost any other Call of Duty game that I've played. Like, there was a 4-year golden era of Call of Duty games. And I really have started to look back on like Black Ops 1 more favorably, whereas I'm not really too much of a fan of Modern Warfare 2 as time goes on. I like the fact that in Black Ops 1 you could just buy stuff with COD points, and that's kind of what Rainbow Six does a little bit with Renown. The more you play, and especially the better you do, the more renown you get, which can then be redeemed on, you know, like skins and generally unlocking operators. You could buy the actual operators without paying money. Now, do I think the prices, especially for some of the cosmetics, are maybe a little high in Rainbow Six? Yeah, definitely. I don't see why a skin for a gun, which may or may not be usable on other characters, is as expensive as it is. But I think that the system itself is not a bad idea. In the same way that I think for Apex, the idea that eventually you get everything from the loot boxes is not a bad idea. I think that in general there should be an end goal to this. Now, how much you need to spend on it, you know, real world money is pretty much the issue. But in principle, I'm kind of partial to that. If you want my honest opinion, I would like to say like, well, at some point you get everything. You know, like there's no there's no more like, oh, you have to get this. Like there's a set amount of loot that you can get in the game. And I mean, like, you might need to spend thousands. I mean, that's where I would draw the line. But ideally, like, you would want to be able to get that stuff normally through in-game play and through a reasonable amount of in-game play. I think that that's the asterisk that people don't throw on there, is that you should be able to get everything in a game with a reasonable amount of gameplay put in, right? Like, if you're basically putting in 40 hours a week and you're not really cracking a dent, I wouldn't consider that reasonable. But if you're putting in, you know, 5 hours a week, you know, whatever, 20 hours a month, and or, you know, whatever game you have, right? Like, I feel like Assassin's Creed with the leveling system is kind of like a reasonable amount of effort given how long the games are, right? Like, we're talking like Odyssey is like a 70-hour game, maybe 80 hours. Valhalla is like a 100-hour game if you do everything, maybe even more if you do everything. Like, I feel like that's the type of stuff that you really need, and you really want it to have that. You really want to be able to say like, oh, well, I put in effort, I was able to get to max level, I was able to get all the gear, I didn't have to buy any of it, right? Like, I think that that's pretty reasonable given the length of those games. I just think that for the most part, a lot of these games are like, well, we'll just keep giving you, you know, currency, and you can't, and if you get a duplicate, you go fuck yourself, which was basically what they did for Mass Effect 3, which was annoying. I would just prefer loot boxes not exist, period, if you want my honest opinion. Like in Battlefield 4, I would just prefer if you played a bunch, you got Battlefield credits, you could spend them on like adaptive camo, which is really what I liked getting in Battlefield 4 was adaptive camo, because it, you know, it changes based on what map you're on. Pretty much that's the only kind of camo really worth using, unless you want to use black or like a certain color, right? Like you want to generally have the camouflage change with what you are. Or what, you know, where you're fighting, and that's why I miss about Battlefield 4. I miss doing like 24/7 op locker metro, but now I'm completely derailed. Going back, yeah, EA is EA. I mean, I'm surprised that I completely missed this. I was actually handed this topic by Double Prime, so thank you for that, because I completely would have missed this. It's kind of ridiculous. They actually have another article for this. I guess I'll put it in the podcast document. Where is it? Let's see. It's really early up. Yeah, here we go. This was actually a sequel article to what they wrote previously, which is FIFA is embroiled in one of the biggest scandals to ever hit the game after an EA employee was alleged to have sold coveted Ultimate Team cards for thousands of pounds. Unconfirmed direct messages appear to show a company employee selling icon cards and packages priced €750 to €1,000, and one WhatsApp message, 3 Prime Icon Moment cards are offered for $1,700. It's basically all of the stuff. And more or less, it's kind of the same article. EA responded, yeah, there's not really too much here. It was just more like breaking the story in general. So beyond that, I actually put Anthem next on here. I might as well read Anthem next in general, like everything that they said. Just because why not? At this point, I might as well read it. Do I have a window? I don't have a window on this thing, and I'm not going to put it up. Actually, I will put it up. Actually, yeah, I'll fucking do it. If I say I do it, I kind of have to. Let's see. I could have done this for the EA stuff. Oops, sorry. Oh, motherfucker. It kind of looks better. It's kind of hard because it's a thin thing anyway. In the spirit of transparency... Sorry, friends. In the spirit of transparency and closure, we want to share that we made the difficult decision to stop our new development work on Anthem, aka Anthem Next. We will, however, continue to keep the Anthem live service running as it exists today. This is going to be gone in like 3 years. I promise you. It's going to be gone. They're not keeping this around for long. I double doggy promise you. EA is just overlooking this right now because they're more concerned about other projects. But this shit is going to be gone in due time. It's not going to be here because they are not going to keep this game running when this game was dead on arrival. But anyway, since Anthem's launch, the team has been working hard to continue and improve the game, releasing multiple updates that brought with them a variety of improvements and introduced new content to play. Toward the end of 2019, we expanded on that effort and started working on a more fundamental restructure of the game. During the development, we provided updates, revealing some of the team's work through blog posts and conversation with you on social media. It's been inspiring for us to see the positive reactions and feedback. I've been incredibly proud of the work the team has been doing. Excited to see and play each build of the new experience. 2020 was a year unlike any other. Okay, COVID segment. We know this will be disappointing for the community Anthem players who have been excited for the improvements we've been working on. It's also disappointing to see for the team who are doing brilliant work. And for me personally, Anthem is what brought me to Bioware in the last 2 years and been some of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my career. Now, I could feel for this, right? I don't know this guy's full story, but like if he was brought on to try to salvage this train wreck, I do feel bad for him. And I do believe that he did I'm just going to assume he did the best that he could, given the situation. Because Anthem was such a fucked up scenario. I don't even think some of the best developers could have turned it around, let alone, you know, this dude. I don't know who Christian is in particular, but I'm just going to assume, like, they're like, I don't really think anyone could have saved this. Because the problem isn't even Anthem. It's Bioware. It's Bioware's higher execs, right? I might still have this open somewhere. Is this it? Yeah. Here we go. Oh, great. It's not resized properly. This is an archive page. This is my favorite article by Jason Schreier. I think I talked about this recently. I love this shit. This is how long ago it is. Gearbox was announcing this stuff. Why can't I scroll? Crap. Yeah, here we go. Within the studio, there's a term called Bioware Magic. It's a belief that no matter how rough a game's production might be, things will always come together in the final months. It happened on the Mass Effect trilogy, on Dragon Age Origins, and on Inquisition. Veteran Bioware developers like to refer to production as a hockey stick. It's flat for a while, and then it suddenly jolts upward. Even when a project feels like a complete disaster, there's a belief that with enough hard work and enough difficult, and the awful industry word now, with enough difficult crunch, it'll come together. After the high-profile failures of Andromeda Anthem, it has become clear that this attitude is no longer working. Pretty much. And then, like, this whole thing, I think the video is still live. We went over this in, like, a 2-hour video, like, reading everything down for this. Like, it gives the recap of the history. It gives the recap of everything about it. Basically, to heavily summarize it, even though I totally recommend you actually listen to this, I really, really, really want you to read this. Basically, to heavily summarize it, the geniuses at BioWare, first of all, you have to understand that after Andromeda, they were so desperate to not have another Andromeda's tier failure, because Andromeda got memed to hell and back. for how poorly it was done. So they did not want to have another Andromeda on their hands. They were hell-bent on not having another Andromeda. And ironically, they ended up with something worse than Andromeda. Because Andromeda still sold. It's just a really, really bad game. And I don't think people expected that drop in quality from Mass Effect 3. Which, even if you didn't like the endings, Mass Effect 3 still had a large, large basin of quality underneath it that still echoed even into the final moments of the game. The endings might not have been very fleshed out. They might have been, the endings of Mass Effect 3 might have been very not fleshed out. They might have been very choose your own color. But at the bare minimum, you have to give the game a little bit of credit in the sense that they were still able to whip out a pretty compelling, a pretty good finale to a series. At least the first half of the game feels pretty decent as far as all things considered. I might not like the plot arc and how the story progressed for the most part, but yeah, at least got to give them some amount of credit for that. On the other hand, like, this game just had no precedent. It had no series to carry it, curry favor with its name. It had nothing. It was just a game that they were releasing. And a lot of studios release a lot of games that don't go anywhere. Because most games that come out are kind of forgettable, admittedly. They're either shovelware, they're either rogue projects that just happen to get enough funding. It's the idea of you throw shit at the wall and you see what sticks. And even my favorite part, like, you could go anywhere in this article and get like a good juicy paragraph out of it. Developers suddenly found themselves working on a game they didn't quite understand. Was it an online loot shooter like Destiny, or was it more of a role-playing game? How do you get around the world? What would the missions look like? We didn't understand the game's concept. When Anthem was presented to us, it was never really clear what the game was. And basically, yeah, like they said, I wish I could find the part. Where's the part? There's a part in here somewhere. Which, by the way, I also just scrolled past. This whole article is, like, fucking pregnantly good. With, like, good writing. Let's see. Yeah, I think Bioware Austin worked on the Tortanic. So they knew what not to do with an online game. And they ignored them. They flat out, basically... the Edmonton studio was, like, basically, like, studio culture. Which is a real thing, by the way. And they just didn't want to listen to Austin, because Austin did the Tortanic, and I'm not sure who did, what's it called? Whoever did Andromeda. Someone did Andromeda, but they did, like, Austin did Tortanic, and they didn't want to listen to them. Just because there's no reason. There is no reason behind it. You could try to, like, path your way through it, but there is no reason behind it. Let's see. I don't think I'm going to find anything off the top of my head. But I definitely recommend you read this article. I have to reread this article, actually, because it's just that good of an article. Oh, and also around this time, Battlefront 2 was having controversy. Isn't that nice? Does this take me to the live page? Oh, no, it doesn't. Holy shit. Yo, I should read this one. This is fucking lit. Is it written by Schreier? Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, basically this is the loot box issue done again. So that's kind of nice. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that Anthem... I don't know why I hid that. Where did I put the Anthem Next blog? Here it is. Okay. Game development is hard. Decisions like these are not easy. Well, you're right. They're not easy, but they're very easy for the higher-ups who tell you what to do. And as I've learned from EA, they kill projects for basically nothing. For not selling Battlefield numbers, they kill projects. So yeah, it's not easy, but it wasn't up to you, in truth. Moving forward, we need to laser focus our efforts as a studio and strengthen the next Dragon Age and Mass Effect titles while providing Tortanic updates. And by the way, I played the Tortanic. It's not bad. It's just, thankfully, it's free, because fuck's sake, that game is rusty. In my opinion, it would have been much better as like a drop-in, drop-out single-player title. But whatever. I mean, MMOs are a market that people still want to try to break into for some reason. And people compare this a lot to Final Fantasy XIV. Because, the Anthem kind of came out and flopped. Everyone knows the original 14 was a massive flop. let's see. Can I just Google 14 problems? Oh God, let's see. Well, we'll take a brief dive into one of my favorite games, and unfortunately, by virtue of having played it so fucking much. Let's see. Because you have to understand that they really, a lot of people made this comparison between BioWare's Anthem and Final Fantasy XIV, it just existing as it did a long time ago. Let's see. It was met with terrible player response and equally terrible media reviews. As you wade ever deeper, they quoted their own fucking review. What? Oh my God. As you wade ever deeper, you discover a swamp muck of bugs, quirks, and design decisions that stroll right up to common sense, retch loudly, and then spit in its face. 49 Metascore. And then it was canceled. And then, you know, one of my favorite developers, Yoshi P, comes in. I'm not really sure what his background in video game development is. However, he comes in and he basically restructures the whole thing. And then we get what's called in the 14 community, we get A Realm Reborn, or just shortly talked about 2.0, which is the restructuring and everything. You can't even access 1.0 content. As far as we're concerned, it's gone and dead. And every time someone asks him if they'll ever have like legacy servers for it, he just laughs because he knows he's never going to do it. Unlike WoW, where, you know, the legacy servers were the good part of the game. How did the company fail to see that its next big thing suffered from mortal wounds, and once it had no choice but to look, how did it then proceed with releasing that game into the wild? And according to Yoshi P, was hubris. It's a lot of company shit. And then he came out and they completely redid the game from the ground up with a story. And now, admittedly, 14 looks good. It doesn't look really good if you really look like close up at everything in the environment, but it looks reasonably good, like just from a glance. I don't know if you've ever seen a stream of mine. I mean, I don't stream at like max quality, but if you ever look at like a stream from the game, it looks pretty good, especially with all the effects flying around and shit. Like, it looks like a good game, unlike, you know, literally the industry lead of World of Warcraft, which still looks like a PlayStation 2 game. This game at least tries to look like PS3 is, and I kind of give it a lot of credit for it. Honestly, this would be worth a deep dive. I have a lot of things I want to deep dive on this podcast at some point. But yeah, then you fast forward 3 years, they re-release A Realm Reborn, and like 1.0 still exists in the lore, and a lot of the story elements that are still to this day going on all these years later are built off of 1.0. Remember, 14 is going to hit its 8-year anniversary this summer. And then it'll also get its 4th expansion this fall, which I'm going to be covering on my channel. So feel free to stop by if you want to see it. But anyway, yeah, they wanted, Anthem needed to do this. And to summarize it, the amount of work and effort that they had to do to just, I mean, it's hard to say in a couple of screenshots, the amount of effort that they needed to do to overhaul the disaster that was 1.0 into that, basically was nothing short of not only saving the Final Fantasy brand, but arguably really saving a Square Enix on a lot of levels. And unfortunately for BioWare, and unfortunately for Anthem, this side project that never really had any identity, any sense of self, was doomed from the fucking start. And it really makes me feel bad, you know, like this guy, I don't know who Christian is, but he comes on and you know, he works his ass off. And then, unfortunately, as I always say, you work for EA. You basically work for the fucking devil, and someday it's gonna bite you in the ass, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how it is. They killed Dead Space for pretty much no reason, because they killed Visceral after making, in my opinion, one of the better, more stable Battlefield games, and at least 2 blockbuster survival horror games that reinvigorated the genre a little bit. They killed him for no other reason. They killed him. They killed Danger Close. They killed Bullfrog. There's a whole list. Was it Cryotic? Something. I forget the name of what it is. Oh crap. I don't have the PNG anywhere that I could find it easily. They killed Maxim, I think, who made The Sims, or they have heavily neutered them. EA does a lot of shit. They've murdered Mirror's Edge. They've murdered Dead Space. The Sims is completely defanged. They don't even know what makes Bad Company good. Like, the list goes on and on. And after a point, I just get kind of sad about... Oh, Battlefront 2 was another game that they fucked up. And now Disney wants other companies to work on the games. Like stuff like that. And then, obviously, we have Andromeda and Mass Effect. And then we have this game, which is just the next in a long line of fucking EA games where they just murder the shit out of them and they don't treat them the way they deserve. But it's kind of still more of a Bioware problem, which is ultimately the sad part. But in any event, have I talked about everything here? Oh, the last thing I want to talk about is the worldwide digital games market on Jan 2021, which is something one of my friends got for me. Where can I find it? Oh, crap. Where'd I put it? That's the tail shit. Okay. Here you go. Slightly cut off. Just slightly. There you go. So basically, this is top grossing titles by category. What I think is really kind of cool about this is that when you get a listing like this, where they actually do market research into these things, as according to Super Data, what you get is just a pretty interesting look into how things are done. And what I actually was specifically referred to as down here, which is that WoW player numbers fell back to normal levels after Shadowlands expansion subsided. From November to January, revenue fell by 61% and users declined by 41%. But I mean, in fairness, they mentioned it doesn't include China, where this is kind of a big thing for them. This happens to every MMO. This is not just a specifically to shit on WoW segment, although I would love to. But more importantly, what they specifically list here is they're going to be adding Burning Crusade into WoW Classic. You're going to be able to either continue playing on WoW Classic just as it is, or you could go to a server that will now have Burning Crusade on it if you just want to, to go up to the Burning Crusade experience. They specifically mentioned this, which is that alternating between releasing all new and classic expansions could cause WoW revenue to spike annually instead of every 2 years. I'm not sure if they really looked into this too much, but I could pretty much tell you right off the bat, this can't happen because they only have one more expansion that they could release. They only have Wrath of the Lich King, because basically Cataclysm is still in the game. Like, you can still play Cataclysm to this day. In fact, that's the basis of what they do if you want to level like in like WoW, just in general. Like, the basis of World of Warcraft right now is you make a character, unless you're making a character for the first time, then I think they force you to go to Exile's Reach. But like, if you make a character, you hop in on your character defined race area, and then you level from there, and like the leveling is way faster because they want to push people to the later shit, which is one thing that WoW can do, unlike 14. They want to push you to the later shit really fast, but this comes at the cost of story cohesion, which they kind of gave up on a long time ago, which is unfortunately why I kind of hate the story of WoW, one of the major elements. And part of the biggest thing that they have going for, or that they can do with it, is that like they can't really do anything beyond Wrath, because everything beyond Wrath is live. You could play it now. If you want to play Cataclysm, you could level 1 to 50 in the Cataclysm areas. And that could be any area in Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms, including the ones added for Kata. If you want to level up, Mists of Pandaria, you could go back and play Mists of Pandaria. But I think what they might do is they might re-release it in such a way that you could play it as if it's like the highest expansion, which really doesn't make much sense to me. I wouldn't put it past them, though. But like, at least in terms of, and like, yeah, technically you could argue that the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King are still in World of Warcraft to this day, but the systems around them are not. Like, you can't do like the talent tree systems. The idea of open world PvP isn't as big of a deal. The leveling isn't scaled as differently. That's like the only thing I could really see them doing, because they don't really have much else that they can do for it. Most of these other things are still in the game as they were originally. I'm not sure when they changed the talents. I think that was a Cataclysm change. I might be wrong. Do not quote me on that, and I'm not going to Google that at the moment because I'm lazy and I don't really want to change tabs. But I do kind of feel like there's a certain element of the games that are gone, because basically Wrath was like peak World of Warcraft. Not even, if you want to say not in terms of content, it was in terms of subscribers. They peaked at Wrath of the Lich King and they never reached that peak again. And since then, WoW has more or less lost, I think, half of its player base, just in general. And the other half have fallen into the typical MMO sine curve of joining whenever something new happens and then falling off as the months go on. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise. This happens with pretty much every MMO that I've looked into, including 14. People will show up, they'll play when the stuff is new, and then after that, they'll do whatever they want to do, and then they'll fucking leave. And that's totally fine. I think that's a fine thing to do. In fact, that's how I generally play WoW myself. Is it's only when I get the heaviest itch to want to play World of Warcraft, and then I'll not play it anymore. But yeah, these are some pretty nice numbers. I've never heard of almost any of these mobile games at all, besides obviously Roblox, Candy Crush, and Pokemon Go. But the console market does not really surprise me at all. The only thing that surprises me up here is Pro Skater 1 and 2. And I guess people really do buy the Valhalla expansion, or not the expansions, the shortcuts. They might be including expansion passes in that, but I guess people really do buy the shortcut kits for Valhalla, and I don't understand why. I genuinely don't understand why. I feel like the game scales the shit out of you. So because you scale, everything scales to you. You never really get anywhere by buying any. I don't know. To each their own, but I feel like that's probably more of a waste than the FIFA shit, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion. Yeah, everything else doesn't really surprise me. I've actually never heard of Dungeon Fighter Online before this, actually. And I'm never going to hear about it again. I don't know anyone that plays it. So, that's more or less all I have for that. I just find it very interesting that, like, Modern Warfare is still on here, even though Activision is damn near doing their best to kill Modern Warfare. They are trying to murder that shit preemptively, and I have no clue why, because people actually still like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. And the reason is because people just like Modern Warfare. It's just a game people like. I mean, Cold War might be the newest shit, but Cold War is still just, at the end of the day, like, it's a historical shooter. I mean, that's what it aims to be, and they've proven they can have historical shooters. But let's be fair here. Most people kind of just want to play Call of Duty. Modern Warfare was like the genre-defining step for them to take place in, and just people stick with it. I mean, it's never really let people down. It's only just aged, and then they've dumped it because they want to release a new one next year. They are actually Eurogamer announced, Eurogamer reported that the next Call of Duty, which is coming out this year, will take place during World War II and will be developed by Sledgehammer Games. According to Eurogamer sources, it'll be called Call of Duty World War II Vanguard and will be just a traditional World War II shooter. And that's kind of what I foresee them doing. I don't think they're going to make any more future CODs, at least not for a long time. I mean, they could make one next year, but next year is going to be Infinity Ward's turn at the bat. So we'll see what they do. And I'm going to fast forward a year here in my mind. They're going to drop Modern Warfare 2. Just because they've set up the story that there's going to be a new Modern Warfare. You know, they've united the timelines between Black Ops and Modern Warfare. Like, they pretty much have set it up so that there will be a Modern Warfare 2. And then I don't know how they'll handle that, but whatever. I mean, like, at least I like watching. I like watching my friends play it, so fair's fair. I mean, listen, they got their thing rolling for them. I'm not going to shit on them for it. I just don't really like Call of Duty anymore, which is sad because a lot of people would associate me with playing Call of Duty all the time, and I genuinely do not like it anymore. But other than that, I guess I should put this in the actual podcast. Other than that, I don't really have too much else. I was going to talk about Final Fantasy 16. I don't really care, I'll be honest with you. But other than that, that's pretty much all I have for this week. It was still like a fair amount of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on, at least a lot of things shaping up. I guess we're going to really have to see what fall 2021 is going to look like. Mostly because of the ongoing pandemic, and that causes things to get delayed and pushed. and all these other sorts of things. I think we have to really wait and see how that's going to pan out, because we have a lot of games that are getting delayed now. Like I said, the Prince of Persia game got delayed, Endwalker got delayed, a lot of other things are really going on, and unfortunately we're just going to have to wait and see how things really pan out in the long run. But that said, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I will see you next week, maybe, and then we can go from there. So big ups to you. Have a good night.